Hello and welcome to Payoff Pitch, Action Network's Major League Baseball betting podcast. I'm Sean Zerillo, joined today by BJ Cunningham, and we're here to talk about day one of the 2024 Major League Baseball postseason. All 8 teams in the wild card round in action today. 4 games getting started at about 2:20 p.m. between the Detroit Tigers and the Houston Astros, wrapping up tonight between the Atlanta Braves and the San Diego Padres. All four series, all 8 teams will be in action again on Wednesday, and then if necessary for game 3s on Thursday before we head into the divisional round. Let's get things started off with that AL series between the Detroit Tigers and the Houston Astros. AJ Hinch facing his old team, and a battle between the old guard and the young guard, because the Astros defending 7 consecutive appearances in the ALCS. The Tigers coming in as the hottest team in baseball and having that Hinch advantage potentially against his former players, maybe being able to pick the right arms to match up against guys like Alex Bregman and Jose Altuve and Yordan Alvarez and Kyle Tucker. He knows them better than anybody else. So I think that is a potential advantage for Detroit in this series. There's no value for this series for me from a prop perspective. I align with the projection. There's no value for me on game 1. I made the money line minus 133. I made the total 6.5. The total has come down from 6.5 to 6. It's now standing at 6 minus 120. So getting pretty low, but an excellent pitching match here between Framber Valdez and Tarek Skubal. BJ, yesterday you gave out Astros to lose game 1, but win the series at plus 450. That was the prop that you liked. Curious if you still like that, if there was anything else that you found from a prop perspective here, and any game 1 thoughts you might have for Tigers and Astros.
Well, it's interesting because this line's kind of been bouncing around a little bit, Sean. Houston opened as a minus 130 favorite, and now, they've risen all the way up to minus 155. Mm-hmm. So I think the question is I think obviously that opening line was maybe just a little bit too short and a little bit too in favor of Skubal, and then how you saw obviously some big money come in and then hit the Astros. I'm at Houston minus 126. So I'm a little bit lower than you, but also kind of just still kind of in line with the market here.
Yeah. That total sort of went from one side of 0% edge to the other side at 0%
right,
edge.
Exactly.
Right?
So there's really just no value there. I'm at, I think you said you're at 6.5. I'm at 6.7. So getting close to maybe over 6 at minus 120. Skubal has obviously been very dominant all season long. The thing about Skubal, and again, I know we probably have a small section of our audience that is coming in here just for the playoffs and hasn't been listening throughout the entire season. Skubal is a very, very good. He's just a really good pitcher. He doesn't have elite stuff plus numbers. His fastball and his slider are above average, but he's just got really good location and command over his entire arsenal, and he's consistently throwing ahead in the count. So that's what makes him so difficult to face. All 4 of his main pitches allowing under a 300 expected weighted on base average. So a really tough matchup here for the Astros. And I think the Tigers will be wanting him to go as deep as possible into this game so that their bullpen can be fresh for games 2 and games 3, and they don't have to put the pressure on whether it be Reese Olson, Keider Montero, or Casey Mize. So that will be interesting. For me, there's one prop I kind of do like, and I understand it's the playoffs and there's short leashes and everything, but Framber Valdez over 6.5 strikeouts, I think, has a little bit of value at, plus 110, plus 115 in that range. It's because he's been very good over the second half of the season. His specifically striking guys out. First half of the season, K per 9 or strikeout rate was sitting about 20%. He wasn't getting the swings and misses that he usually did. But now we get over the second half of the season, his strikeout rate has risen all the way up to 29%. And his stuff has just gotten better. Stuff plus rating has gone from 110 to 119. And basically all of his pitches have just gotten better. And, if we take his strikeout rate from the second half of the season and he, on average, faces around 25 batters, we get a projection a little bit over 7 strikeouts here. And the Tigers strike out at one of the highest rates of any of the teams in the playoffs. Over the second half of the season, 3rd highest K rate in Major League Baseball. And against left-handed pitching, they have the 7th highest strikeout rate. And they are also below league average in terms of striking out and whiff rate against left-handed curveballs, which is the main pitch that Valdez has used to get most of those strikeouts. 92 of his 169 strikeouts have came off of his curveball. So I know it's the playoffs. I know there are potentially short leashes, but if Valdez is having a good game, and going up and getting a lot of strikeouts, I have a hard time seeing how the Astros are just going to pull him and, pull him here. So I like Valdez over 6.5 strikeouts is the only thing I really like for this game.
Yeah, I believe the Tigers have the highest strikeout rate against left-handed pitching amongst all teams in the second half. They were north of 30%. There's a big difference in strikeout rate in the series. It is why I prefer Houston to advance. I think they have the better bullpen. They have more starting pitching depth, which doesn't matter as much in a 3-game series as it might in a 5 or 7-game series. But you can only throw Scuba once. So I give Houston the starting pitching edge in games 2 and 3. I give them a pretty big bullpen edge, and they have the better lineup for me as well. Detroit, the better base running and defensive team. That is their advantages. They're going to have to take advantage with stolen bases. They're going to have to make some nice plays defensively, probably if they want to upset the Astros. Moving on, 3 p.m. start between the Kansas City Royals and the Baltimore Orioles. Probably last year's darlings against this year's darlings, right? Baltimore was the darling of the 2023 regular season, got into the playoffs, got swept by the Texas Rangers, went home. I'm hoping the Orioles can put that juju on the Royals this year because I like the Orioles to sweep this series 2-0 at plus 210. There was slight value for me on the series line, but there was more value for me on that sweep prop. You could alternatively bet the Orioles minus 1.5 games at plus 210. I like this down to plus 195. Projected this closer to plus 180. The starting pitching in game 3 would be relatively even, if not favor Kansas City. BJ and I discussed this yesterday. The Orioles have Corbin Burns. They have Zach Eflin, but Grayson Rodriguez is still on the IL, so they have to choose between Cade Povich and Dean Kramer or lesser options for game 3. I like how Povich has pitched over the past month, but he's still a drop-off relative to Burns and Eflin, and he's still much more comparable to Michael Wacha than Eflin is to Seth Lugo. And Burns and Reagan's pretty comparable in game 1 for me, but I'm going to make the Orioles around 63% in game 2, assuming it is Lugo against Eflin. So I'm expecting to project value on their money line when that line comes out and betting their series 2-0 proper to win 2-0, to win by 1.5 games, basically aligns with all of that opinion. I'm essentially betting the Orioles before game 1 to win in game 2 right now and getting it at plus 210 compared to a projected line of plus 180. As I said, my price target there, plus 195, would not go below that. Now, yesterday on the pod, I said I think the Royals can absolutely win the series, and they can, but if they do, I think it'll be in game 3. I think the Orioles lock this up before game. I think there's value in the Orioles to lock this up before game 3. I think if this gets to game 3, because of the starting pitching, the Royals have a big chance of stealing it. So, I'll take Baltimore to sweep. And BJ, you looks like you're on Kansas City for game 1 on the money line, and also a prop on, hopefully for my sake, the AL Rookie of the Year.
Yeah.
Because there were 2 big homers in the final week after I gave him out. So hoping that was enough to swing the award after Luis Heel gave up, I think, 3 homers on Sunday to the Pirates.
Yep. I do like the Royals in this game 1. You're getting up to plus 140 now, which I think is in range. I projected the Orioles at minus 126, so a little bit of value for me on the Royals. What it really comes down to is what's funny is that, Sean, both these starting pitchers have the exact same expected ERA, 2.73, Reagan's and Burns. But the thing is, I like the matchup maybe a little bit more here for Cole Reagan's. He's been very dominant against right-handed hitters, basically throwing inside on them. He throws inside at maybe one of the highest rates in baseball with his fastball and his changeup. And if you look through the Orioles lineup, yes, they do have a lot of left-handed hitters, which typically, lefty on lefty usually favors the pitcher. Although since Reagan's is throwing kind of away to left-handed pitchers, they've had a little bit more of success against him. But a lot of those left-handed hitters in the Orioles lineup are not that great in left versus left. And that's what I'll kind of get to with Colton Cowser here in a little bit. But if you look through the Orioles lineup, specifically when they have to face velocity, their numbers tend to kind of drop off, especially against left-handed pitching. This season against lefties that throw 95 miles per hour faster, which Reagan says average over 95 miles per hour on his fastball, they only have 2 guys with an expected weighted on base average over 300 in their lineup, which is a little concerning. And then when you look and see how they fare against left-handed changeups, because that's been Reagan's best pitch, They only have a 284 expected weighted on base average, which is below league average against left-handed changeups. So I think the matchup for Ragans is actually somewhat decent. Now, as far as the Royals are concerned, it's a little concerning for their offense. They're not very good against right-handed cutters, which you got to be able to hit if you're going to face Corbin Burns. So that's a big problem there. But the biggest thing for me, Sean, is the bull. I think what this is really going to come down to is the bullpens, defense, and base running. Because these two starting pitchers are pretty much even, and because both these offenses don't have the best type of matchups, the Royals bullpen over the last 30 days is third in Major League Baseball in xFIP. They have a significant advantage in terms of defense and in terms of base running as well. So I think this line is a little bit short or a little bit too high for the Royals. So since I'm projecting a little bit of edge on them, I do like the value on them at plus 140.
Did you project Vinny Pasquantino as in their lineup? Because they sent out a tweet this morning indicating that he will be back on their wild card roster.
I didn't, so that would even be better.
Yeah. They sent out an image of a close up of Sasquatch. So I'm assuming that was positive indication for Vinny Pasquantino, who's been out since late August, and the Royals really struggled offensively without him in September, using Yuli Gurriel at first base. 95 WRC plus in September. That was 19th in MLB. They're also much worse on the road than they are at home. I'm not sure if BJ mentioned that. He cut out briefly, and I assume that was the split he was mentioning or the stat he was mentioning during that moment. But the Royals' lowest strikeout rate in MLB at home, 17.9%. They are 6th on the road, 20.9%, and they fall from a league average offense 15th to 21st on the road. That's been present in their splits throughout the year. They just strike out much less at home than they do on the road. I don't know what it is. I don't know if they have the that new like pitching machine that simulates like the actual pitcher. There's like a new advanced pitching machine that guys are taking BP off of now that is enhancing, performance for teams when they're at home. The Rangers saw it significantly last year. The Diamondbacks saw that this year. And the Royals have big home road splits this year as well. So I'm wondering if that could be a factor. But just to reiterate, BJ on Kansas City in game 1. I'm taking Baltimore to win the series 2-0, mostly because I like them in game 2 at plus 210. And just, you can always bet the minus 1.5 game spread instead of the win 2-0 prop. Should be the same bet, may get different odds at the same book. Make sure to check out both markets.
I was realizing I forgot to give out the prop that I said I was going to.
Yes, you
just real quick.
Well, around game 1.
Yeah, Cows are under a half a hit. 0.70 batting average against, or expected batting average against left-handed. Fastball is 95 miles per hour faster. 88 weighted runs created plus against lefties. If you look at the Royals bullpen, it's almost all lefties except for 2 guys. It's Scriber and Urseg. So there is a situation where we get later in these innings and they may pinch it for him to get a righty on a lefty. So that would be the prop.
Good stuff. I haven't, because I was writing my previews and digging into these series, I'm able to dive into the prop markets more readily for later games in the series, games 2 and 3. I'll be looking at props more for games 2 through 5 of the DS and the CS series, games 2 through 7. I will have a bigger overnight look into prop markets. The one angle that's going to catch my eye from these 2 AL series is Yordan to walk. That was the theme throughout last postseason. Guys pitching around Yordan Alvarez come playoff time. Now, I don't expect Tarik Skubal to do that. Yordan's also only walked 1 time in, I think, 10 or 12 plate appearances against Skubal. But I'm sure AJ Hinch doesn't want to let Yordan hurt him either in this series. And I would imagine he does get the intentional pass at some point, or at least pitched around. So maybe not betting Yordan to walk at plus 225 today, but probably considering it at some point in games 2 and 3. And hopefully for BJ's sake, there is a game 3. Moving on to the NL wildcard series, the New York Mets are going to go back to Milwaukee to face the Brewers, where they ended their season on Sunday. Didn't technically end their season because then they had to fly to Atlanta. Came from behind dramatically in game 1. Grimace heard the prayers. He delivered. He destroyed my under. That game was dead under 3-0 in the 8th inning, and the Braves' high leverage relievers gave up, I think, 6 or 7 straight hits. That was horrendous. If you joined me on that under, that game was under the entire way. BJ, you and I have a consensus bet here, though, for game one of Mets and Brewers. We both like the under 7.5. I projected this total at 6.8. Curious where you have it. But I would like the under 7.5 to about minus 116. It's been sitting at minus 115. It's basically right at the border of where I would bet it to, but you can still have plenty of books who are at minus 115. I'd say half the market's still at about minus 115, but it has started to push closer to minus 120. Now, Edwin Diaz, Phil Maton have both thrown consecutive days for the Mets. That is the one situation to watch with their bullpen. They also may feel a little bit more compelled to throw Luis Severino a little bit deeper into this game, considering they want to save their bullpens for games 2 and 3. But the Brewers have one of the best bullpens in baseball, top 5 by all second half expected indicators, and it is well rested coming into today. I do have some concerns about Freddie Peralta. He's seen a performance dip relative to prior seasons. His strikeout minus walk rate is down. The hits are up. That said, they're going to be very aggressive, pulling him out of the game if he is struggling at all. This is best 2 of 3. There's no time to be, have the long leash with the pitcher unless they're throwing well. So, like I said, I'm a little bit concerned that Severino gets it left in there a little bit too long, but I doubt that's actually going to be the case. The Mets just may not have Edwin Diaz for the 9th inning tonight after a very stressful bad inning yesterday and throwing on back-to-back days. The one prop angle I will mention for this series, I have not bet into them yet today. I didn't look yet today, but the Brewers stolen base props. Milwaukee is 16 for 16 against the Mets on the base pass this year. They're the best best base running team in baseball. Arguably the best defensive team left in the playoffs. I would say Toronto is maybe the best defensive team in baseball, but they're the best defensive team remaining in the postseason. And they've just proven to be a matchup nightmare for the Mets because the Mets have not been able to control the running game against the opponents since Noah Syndergaard was on the roster. It's been a while. It's been 10 years of the Mets just giving up stolen bases freely to opponents. And the Brewers should continue to run wild here. That is how they score runs. They're league average offense otherwise, but number one in base running value. They get guys in a scoring position, take extra bases, and that's how they get runs on you. So, under 7.5 for both of us. BJ, curious about your thoughts on that, but also Brewers stolen base props. And then lastly, Brewers to win the series at minus 130. I projected that at minus 147. Based on the sweep prop, Brewers are plus 250 to sweep. I made that closer to plus 200. Based upon the sweep prop, the market is saying that the Brewers line is going to be even money against Sean Manaea in game 2. I will make that closer to minus 115. So I'll be betting that up to minus 105 for game 2. That's what the market is implying. Putting the sweep prop at plus 250, their game 1 line at minus 135 or so. That is telling me, if you parlay that together, you would get even money in minus 130 equals about plus 250. So that prop is implying a line of about even money on Milwaukee in game 2. Yeah. That is where I see the value, I think, on this series. Again, like the Baltimore series, you could bet on Milwaukee in game 2, essentially, before game 1 with that plus 250 sweep prop. And there is value there, but I'll just lay their series price at minus 130. BJ, Mets Brewers game 1 on the under with me. Any other props for you here? Any other angles you're taking with this series?
So projected 7, right on 7. So I'm with you on the under. Freddie Peralta, it's been interesting, and I haven't seen an outs prop floated for him. This is one of my favorite props to do during the playoffs is out totals, because typically you can get inflated ones on guys because they're using what they've done to the regular season, whereas in the playoffs they get short leashes and everything. They haven't floated one for Freddie Peralta, which I think is kind of interesting.
That is, yeah. It's
not
out yet.
I would potentially be looking to play an under there, because if you look at his second half numbers since the All-Star break, he has not been very good. 4.55 xFIP. He's somebody that's gone with the main trend in Major League Baseball, and he's throwing a high number of elevated fastballs. The Mets hit elevated fastballs very well, so that's not necessarily the best matchup for him. All of his secondary pitches have been very good, all allowing below a 300 expected weighted on base average, but that fastball is what's kind of let him down. That's what he was kind of dominant with last season. So that's the concerning thing here for the Brewers. And with how good their bullpen is, I just don't see a scenario that they're just going to let him get past even probably once he gets through the order a second time. If he gets through it unscathed, that's it. We're done. We're pulling him. But any sign of trouble, so in terms of an outs prop, anything. I would say anything, 15 and a half. I don't know if that's my guess as well. They'll probably set that. If you can get that on,
might even be 16 and a half.
Might
for
even
a guy
be
like Peralta, I feel like they usually put 16 and a halves. Yeah, they try to entitle like the 15 and a half. I'd bet I think 16 and a half is probably right for him. Just thinking about like what my gut reaction would be if I saw the number. I feel like most people would bet the over at 15 and a half. Most people bet or would be like 50-50 about it at 16 and a half. So maybe 16 and a half for Peralta is probably the number. It is strange though that it's not out yet. I'd imagine they're cautious not to hang something too high because they don't want to get the under banged. I'm going to take a look into some Brewers steal props. I know Severino's permitted 15 on 20 attempts this year. He allowed 9 on 10 attempts last year. So it doesn't seem like he controls the running game particularly well either. Anything above 75% is bad. So I would say I'd be targeting Brewers steal props on top of the under today and the Brewers series money line. Pivoting to the game tonight that we don't have official starting pitching confirmation for yet with the Atlanta Braves going against the San Diego Padres. The Braves don't have a pitcher who is healthy, who's on full rest. Chris Sale scratched yesterday with a back issue from the second game in Atlanta that the Braves needed to win, ended up throwing Grant Holmes in his stead. But Max Fried would be on 3 days rest today. Charlie Morton, I believe, started on Saturday. If Sale's not available, obviously he's not going, and Spencer Schwellenbach also pitched yesterday. So they don't have a single one, and Reynaldo Lopez threw an inning in relief yesterday as well. So they don't have a single starting pitcher who is on full rest. Max Fried, the closest thing to it, on 3 days rest. Doesn't seem like they're going to use him on short rest, even though he's headed into free agency. He's had some injury issues this year. I think they're going to do right by him and not pitch him on 3 days rest. Seems like today, for game one, their starting pitcher will be one of Bryce Elder or AJ Smith-Shawver or old friend Ian Anderson. Ian Anderson, who made a big impact when the Braves won the World Series a few years ago, coming up very late in the year, joining their rotation and giving them significant innings in October. I think this pitching staff is super dangerous after today. Today is a big problem. Coming off the doubleheader, they used Raisel Iglesias and I'm blanking on their other high leverage reliever, but they used their two best relievers on back-to-back days in that matchup. Oh, it was Joe Jimenez. So they used their two best relievers on back-to-back day or in both games of that doubleheader. They also used other relievers on back-to-back days. The bullpen, which I rate as the second best in the National League, pretty worn down today. And they're probably starting a guy who's being brought up from AAA, and it's potentially Ian Anderson, who I believe did fly to San Diego with this Braves team. So unless they just bullpen it for game one, bring out Jesse Chavez to start, and just go inning by inning from there, the Padres should have a pretty significant pitching advantage today with Michael King. In terms of actual bets for the series, I didn't project any value either on the series line, the total, or the game one line. However, I did add more World Series matchup bets on the Padres. I played Padres Yankees, Padres Astros, and Padres versus Guardians, as we discussed yesterday. If you were in my playoff preview article, I had the math wrong in the World Series matchups part. The math only added up to like 65%. I'm not really sure what happened initially. There is value on all three, the ones I just mentioned. Just to reiterate, you don't have to play them in the exact matchup markets at those books. You could just parlay the two pennant odds together and likely get a better price than they're offering you, building it out for you. So just as a constant reminder, if you're going to bet exact matchup props, two teams to make the World Series together, you're better off parlaying their pennant odds more often than not than you are taking a look at the exact matchup odds at that particular book. In regard to the Braves and Padres series, these are the two best bullpens in baseball for me. Padres were the best team overall in the second half. I think they have a big bullpen edge for tonight. Obviously well rested, on top of the fact that they just have the slightly better bullpen to begin with. Michael King was also awesome in the second half, which I think is really good to see because he surpassed his career high in innings pitched by 70 innings. He had about 106 innings last season, 176 this year. I think it was 103 versus 173. But expected FIP and strikeout minus walk rate both improved in the second half of the season, with other guys like Tanner Houck, who extended out to career high innings this year. Their second half metrics dipped as they surpassed career high in innings. It's good to see King having his metrics improve down the stretch. I think it's a really good sign for this Padres rotation. Also, since Fernando Tatis Jr. returned to their lineup, 6th in WRT plus in September, they also have the lowest strikeout in baseball by a wide margin. And even if you took Luis Arias out of their lineup, they would still have the lowest strikeout rate in the National League. So San Diego, for me, built to win in the postseason, built to have a big edge in game one and get out to a lead in this series. They have to lock this one up. But I added more on their futures in theory today, betting them the 3 best teams in the AL to make the World Series. And if you still like their futures odds, San Diego to win the World Series and to win the NL pennant are still actionable, in my opinion, as well. BJ, Braves and Padres game 1 tonight. I know we don't have a starting pitcher yet for the Braves officially, so it's kind of tough to have an actionable take on this one. But right now, assuming Anderson, I made the line minus 143 for San Diego. Atlanta currently sitting plus 150. I made the total 7. It has moved up from 7 to 7.5, 7 plus money. I'd bet under 7.5 at minus 110. I think that's the only thing that would be in range for me. Maybe Braves at plus 160. Any thoughts for you?
Yeah, that's kind of where I was leaning to. Like, this is about as horrible of a situation as the Braves could have asked for going into the playoffs, right? Like, you have to use up your entire bullpen in a doubleheader the day before. You have to travel all the way across the country to San Diego to play in this game. I can't imagine Ian Anderson's going to pitch more than 4 innings in this game if he does start. So that leaves it up to the back end of the Braves bullpen, which the Braves do have a very, very good bullpen. And it is the playoffs, so if they do have a lead, like, I don't think they're going to hold back Iglesias, Jimenez, all of these different guys. They're just going to use them. Like, there's no situation where, they're going to say, well, we're going to save them for games 2 and potentially game 3. It's like, no, let's just do or die this. So, if it floats to plus 160 in that range, I'll probably end up being on the Braves. But yeah, other than that, just a very, very difficult situation for them. The one thing I'll say about the Braves, they weren't that good against right-handed pitching this season, specifically elevated fastballs. They had the 5th worst expected weighted on base average against those. And King, although he utilizes his sinker pretty often, when he does throw his fastball 25% of the time, it's mainly up in the zone. So I think you could have a lot of success there. But yeah, if we get to plus 160, I think that's a little too high here for this Braves team. So that's where I'd be looking. But yeah, hard to gauge this if we don't know who the starting pitcher is.
Yeah, I think I made the series price about minus 160, and that's assuming that Chris Sale starts in game 2 for them. They're still waiting to see if he's going to be able to pitch at all in this series. I would assume they would expect to have Max Fried go in game 2 and then hopefully have Chris Sale go in game 3, but the prognosis didn't seem good yesterday. I saw a lot of takes immediately yesterday, like, oh, they scratched Sale, hope they can make the postseason, still play him in game 1. No, they scratched him because he's hurt, and they owe him $22 million next year, guaranteed, not a team option. And they will get Acuna and Strider back, and they probably view next year as a better opportunity for them than this year's. Don't hurt Chris Sale in this postseason when you may have a better team or the best team overall next year if you can keep everything together. They also have a team option on him for 2026, I believe, as well. So yeah, just to reiterate, since we're talking about the Padres, I just want to get my price targets back out there. But I made them plus 450 to win. I said it backwards yesterday. I think I said I made them plus 450 to win the World Series and 10-1 to win the NL pennant. That was obviously spoken backwards. I make them plus 450 to win the NL pennant and 10-1 to win the World Series. And I'd take about 12-1 on their World Series odds and about plus 550 on their pennant odds as of right now. We got that bet down from 6-1 to plus 550 yesterday, even a little bit lower than that. But just to reiterate, also the Padres and Astros to make the World Series together, the Padres and Guardians to make the World Series together, and the Padres and Yankees to make the World Series together is what I added today, on top of Orioles to win their series 2-0 at plus 210, the Brewers to win their series at minus 130, like that up to minus 147. And BJ and I are both on the Mets and Brewers under 7.5. BJ, really looking forward to this first day of playoff games. Any final thoughts for you before we get out of here?
No, it should be a ton of fun. These especially playing games during the day. I mean, Scuba Valdez is going to be an incredible matchup. But no, it should be a lot of fun. And I think what we're going to get is after these first rounds, because it's kind of hard when we go ace versus ace. I think it's going to, once we get the more bullpens more involved and some of the secondary pitchers, I think it's going to create more value and more bets for us as we get later on in this World Series or this playoffs.
Yeah, I think all the most intriguing teams left in the playoffs are all in the next round. I mean, Aaron Judge and Juan Soto and Shohei Ohtani and Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman all sitting there. And it, in what we've discussed as a wide open playoff, the irony would be very strong if we end up with a Yankees Dodgers star-studded World Series. Sure, a lot of people would be happy. I would not be one of those. So, hopefully one of our Padres futures gets through to the NL or get a little bit more of an exciting team. I would take a little wild card run from the Tigers or Royals before I take a Dodgers Yankees World Series. That's for sure.
That would be no fun.
So thank you for tuning in. Enjoy this day one of playoff games. Don't forget to download the free award-winning Action Network app and make sure to leave us that 5-star rating and review wherever you listen to your podcast. We will be in your podcast feed every weekday when there are playoff games during the 2024 postseason. Make sure to check out the Action Network Discord. There is a link to the Discord in the episode description. We'll be back for more tomorrow. For BJ Cunningham, I'm Sean Zerillo. Thank you for listening to Payoff Pitch, Action Network's MLB betting podcast. Good luck with all of your bets. We'll see you on Tuesday.